what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the word veganism? Elitism? Extremism? In this talk, I'm going to try and convince you that veganism should not be associated with elitism or extremism. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the philosophy of veganism and try and convince you that there are strong reasons to go vegan. So let's start off with the basic argument for veganism. The basic argument for veganism goes as follows. It's wrong to cause unnecessary suffering. Eating meat causes unnecessary suffering. Therefore, eating meat is wrong. The idea that it's wrong to cause unnecessary suffering is relatively uncontroversial. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. Instead, I'm going to spend time on the second idea, the idea that eating meat causes unnecessary suffering. Because this idea is a bit more controversial and that might take some more convincing. So it may be objected that eating meat does not cause unnecessary suffering. And the idea here would be that animals live happy, nice lives and just have one bad day. Right? No. Roughly 90% of animals raised worldwide are raised in factory farms. And in factory farms, animals are treated quite brutally. I'm going to paint you a picture, perhaps a gruesome one. And it's going to be one explaining what occurs in factory farms, just briefly. So in factory farms, animals are not given adequate food, water, or space. Oftentimes, for their entire lives, animals cannot even turn around. In factory farms, animals often live in piles of their own feces and in their own urine. And what this causes is for there to be a whole bunch of ammonia in the air, which then burns the eyes, the throats, and the lungs of animals. This is especially the case in chicken farms. Thus, the idea that eating meat causes unnecessary suffering is a strong one and is true. However, I encourage you to do your own research on this. Go and do your own research and see if what I'm saying about factory farms is true. Let's move on to some objections now. So the first objection is that eating meat does not need to come through the process of factory farming. I agree. However, with the world we live in, eating meat does come from the process of factory farming. Meat does come from the process of factory farming. Thus, for the decisions we make now, they do point in favor of veganism. Another objection could be, well, why not vegetarianism? All the arguments I've given so far in terms of the basic argument, they seem to point in favor of vegetarianism just as they do with veganism. This would be a good objection. However, it doesn't take into account the process by which we get our animal products. So the process of getting a chicken and getting a chicken egg is largely the same because both come through the process of factory farming where animals are brutally tortured in these horrendous conditions. So eating a chicken and eating a chicken egg still is supporting the process of factory farming. So let's move on to the next objection. So this is an objection that I have heard many times, and essentially the objection goes like this. Well, eating meat is natural, and the idea here is that since eating meat is natural, there's usually an implication that because eating meat is natural, it is therefore morally permissible. So I understand kind of the reasoning here, but this is committing what is called in philosophy the naturalistic fallacy. So what is natural and what is moral are two different things, and we have to be careful to make this distinction. So to make this more intuitive, let's look at some other examples of things that are natural, but we wouldn't say are moral. Lying and killing are two things that are natural. Humans have been lying and killing for thousands upon thousands of years. However, just because lying and killing are natural, we would not want to say that lying and killing are morally permissible. Thus, what is natural and what is moral are two different categories. They may sometimes align, but they needn't necessarily align. So, the next objection that I'm going to go through is a bit more of a fun one that unfortunately I have heard many times in my life. And the argument goes something like this. I call it the island argument. And the island argument essentially goes as follows. Well, what if you were on an island? Would you then eat meat? Here's how I respond. Yes, but we're not on an island. So let's move on to more of a serious objection now. And this is probably the best objection that I have heard. And it's what I call the killing happy animals argument. And the killing happy animals argument goes something like this. We do more good by bringing happy animals into existence. And had it not been for our desire to eat meat, then these animals would not have come into existence, and we would not have been doing as much good then. So this is an interesting argument. However, it misses out what is ongoing in the actual world. In the actual world, most animals are living in factory farms, and thus most of the meat we get is coming from factory farms where these animals are not happy. Remember, factory farms are brutal. They have brutal conditions, and thus these animals are not happy. They're very miserable and suffering tremendously. Furthermore, even if we strive to have all animals live happy lives with lots of space roaming around outside, the thing is, there just isn't enough space on Earth to do this. Plus, there are other considerations, such as the fact that ecological destruction would continue to happen through animal farming, climate change destruction would continue to happen through animal farming, and health-wise, we would not be living the optimal lives that we could. So let's move on to another objection. And this objection is what I call the "it's my choice" argument. And the "it's my choice" argument essentially goes like this. Eating meat is a personal choice, and we shouldn't judge others for personal choices that they make. Now, I understand where this is coming from, but there's a bit of a confusion going on with the word choice. And this is because there are two meanings to the word choice. The first is what I will call a value-free choice. For example, let's say I'm deciding whether to use a red toothbrush or a blue toothbrush? So this decision is a value-free choice. And this is because it doesn't really matter whether I choose a blue toothbrush or a red toothbrush. So if someone was to come up to me screaming at me for using a blue toothbrush instead of a red toothbrush, well, this would be ridiculous because values aren't associated with this choice. However, with value-based choices, the second kind of choice, and this is where eating meat falls into, well, values are an integral part of this decision. Unnecessarily torturing animals is a bad thing. It is morally wrong. Thus, someone partaking in the system that contributes to this unnecessary suffering is doing wrong and is not merely making a personal choice. So let's move on to wrapping up now. So I want to make clear that I don't think everyone has a moral obligation or an equal moral obligation to go vegan. For example, Tibetan goat herders in, let's say, the mountains are going to have difficulty going vegan. This is because crops up in the mountains are sparse. Similarly, for Indigenous peoples in the far north of Canada, I don't think that many or most or perhaps even all of them have a moral obligation to go vegan. And this is again because of the conditions that they are in. It's difficult to have access to vegan foods in the very far north of Canada, for example. So I completely understand that there are practical considerations at play. However, for most people in Western countries, we should go vegan. And if we don't go vegan, at least go vegetarian. And if we don't go vegetarian, we should at least largely reduce our meat consumption. And another important thing to do, even if one doesn't go vegan, is to support vegans. Support your friends and your family members that go vegan. Thank you.